Most Canadians believe in doing their part to recycle. But do we actually know what happens in that recycling process? And are there better ways to go about it? Joining me today is Paul Ryan. He is the Vice Chair and Project Lead for the Southern Alberta Energy from Waste Association, or SAWA, which is developing a project designed to turn non-recyclable garbage waste into electricity. Sounds great. Paul, thank you so much for joining us here today at Bridge City News.
Well, Paul, thank you for having me on.
You bet. Looking forward to the conversation here. I want you to, first of all, tell us a little bit about SAWA, because this has roots right here in Southern Alberta. It's not just Lethbridge, but beyond this, all kinds of small communities in Southern Alberta, right?
Well, if you look at wanting to reduce our carbon footprint in Alberta, or actually even in Canada, it doesn't get any better than a homegrown, born in Alberta solution, because this really is grassroots. This is like a great group of people that got together, small urbans, large rurals, all working together voluntarily to try to find a solution. And I got to tell you, it's a pleasure, a thrill to actually be a part of this.
That's awesome. So now this started in, was it Vulcan? Is that correct?
Well, I'm a little fuzzy on that particular part because that happened before I got asked to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, for the most part, my understanding is that it started in the Vulcan region with the Vulcan Regional Waste Commission, the town of Vulcan, the city of Lethbridge was part of that, and the town of Coaldale, and I believe possibly Willow Creek. But I mean, this really is a bunch of the local boys getting together and said, you know something, we got to stop throwing garbage into the ground and having it go into our water wells and into our groundwater. There's got to be a better way. So what is the better way?
So you are developing, as I understand it, a project that's designed to turn, again, non-recyclable garbage and waste into electricity. So could you explain how that actually works? And I understand there's a bit of a Swedish model that this has been based on as well, right?
I really can't identify any particular technology because when we get to the procurement stage, of course, that would be inappropriate for me to do. But if you look at this, what this is that this is an electrical generation facility
Mm-hmm.
that instead of using natural gas or coal as a fuel to produce electricity, this uses garbage. And you can produce a tremendous amount of steam also that can be used for many different applications, for recycling, for meat processing, for vegetable processing, because everything we do when it comes to our food supply requires hot water. And, it's incredibly efficient to take surplus steam, a value-added product from an energy from waste facility, and then use that for processing other products. So very much like what they did with the facility in Burnaby. They used to ship their steam to a cardboard recycling facility where they used that to create the hot water they needed for processing. So there's lots of really good value-added parts of this, but simplistically, it's burning waste instead of gas or coal to make electricity.
Right, and again, you're burning the non-recyclable waste there. Now, I understand as part of this process here, as you're analyzing things and figuring things out, you actually hired some people to analyze what's inside the dumpsters out there, right? So what did you find?
Hired some people. I don't even, I think we've had something like 24 engineers now working on this project, the different parts of it. And the one you're talking about is probably one of my favorite ones when it comes to like describing what we did. So if you're going to manage waste and if you want to create electricity out of it, you've got to know what's in that waste stream. What is that caloric value? So how much of it is wood? How much of it is plastic? How much of it is cardboard? How much of it is paper? How much of it is lettuce and tomatoes and metals and all those different things? So basically, it's called a waste stream characterization, where you go out and you categorize the waste. And from that, our engineers are able to estimate what the caloric value of that waste is. In other words, how much energy is in it. Depending on who you talk to, who you read, 1 ton of municipal solid waste is the equivalent of 3/4 of a barrel of oil. But you got to know what's in it. And so it's basically a whole bunch of engineers in white Tyvek suits doing dumpster diving. And yes, and a lot of people laugh when you say that because they picture something. But really, that's what it is. And the waste is just taken out literally, taking the bags apart and separating out the waste into the different types of things that are in that waste stream, and then weighing it, and then coming up with an estimate of what does the average person produce when it comes to household waste. And when they produce that household waste, what's the caloric value of that? How much of that can be used for something else? And how much of it actually can we get into the recycling stream? Because, if you look at SAWA's mission statement, very clearly we say that we are not interested in using things that can be recycled as part of the feedstock for an energy from waste facility. We've got friends in the big cities, and Lethbridge is certainly one of them, where they work very, very hard to get as much stuff out of the landfill as they can. And a lot of times you spend a lot of money, and you probably saw the City of Calgary announcement that there are now $300,000 to store plastic that can't get recycled, and another $130,000, I think it is, to throw it in the landfill. Well, that's the kind of stuff that if I was king for a day, I would say, well, can you hang on to that for me till I build my energy from waste facility? Because instead of throwing it in the landfill, why don't you send it over here and let us use it to generate some electricity and make some hot water, get some value out of it, and not burn it in the landfill. So we went out and characterized the waste stream. Certainly we now know what's in it. We did it in a number of different places for our members, not just down in the county of Lethbridge, but we did it all over. And what we found is that it's relatively consistent with the national average. It changes during the season, summertime, wintertime are different. But certainly it did give our engineers the information they need to then be able to look at our cost predictions. In other words, if you've got that much caloric value in your waste, you can generate this much electricity with it. And then when you generate that much electricity, we can sell that and help offset the costs of running the operation.
So this production facility, once it's up and running, will it feed the grid as well?
Well, certainly, Paul, there's actually two approaches to that I've been made aware of. And so one is, yes, you can feed the grid. And so in order to do that, you need to be by a major power transmission line, which is one of the criterias on the nice to haves with where we would like to put it. But the other one has this colloquial term, it's called inside the fence. And what that means is that you have an energy from waste facility that generates a lot of electricity, generates a lot of steam. Do you need to sell it to the grid, or can you sell it locally to industries that build up around energy from waste facilities? Because they make incredibly good anchor points for heavy industrial parks or mid-industrial parks like recycling, manufacturing, paper, anything that needs electricity and heat next to those things can really benefit from it, because you don't have to build new transmission lines and new transmission wires and the carbon footprint that's all associated with that, and then fight with everybody to build it on their land to get it to your industrial park. If you can actually use that as district energy or inside the fence energy, there's an incredible monetary savings in having to supply that energy. But the other one is that it's cheap for them to buy it from you. So you think of all the greenhouses we have down in Redcliffe, down by Medicine Hat.
Right, yeah.
What are they doing there? Well, they're there because they got cheap energy. So, when you go buy them little tiny 6 cucumbers in the package at the supermarket that you go to, that's where they come from. And so what SAWA did was, instead of taking that approach, we asked the question, what is the best way to treat waste other than landfilling? And man, we came across a tremendous amount of technologies, varying degrees of environmental benefit, considerable differences in operating costs. And one of the rules that we gave to our engineers is that whatever technology we pick, it's got to be able to address the whole waste stream, not just a little part of it. Because unless you address the whole waste stream, you're still landfilling. And so let's look at what we can do. And the other rule that we gave them is that it has to be demonstrated technology, commercially demonstrated. So not this stuff that the boys came up with in the garage on the workbench, and not this stuff that people say should be on the Star Trek Enterprise. It's stuff that we can actually go and stand by and touch and feel and look at, and look at their emissions tests, the regulatory responses that they had to their requirements and their operating permits, to do stack tests and do the emissions, so you can actually
let me ask
see it.
about that. Yeah, you mentioned, again, you're burning non-recyclables here, right, to produce steam and electricity. So what are the emissions like? Is that going to cause, a big carbon footprint, or is the technology such that it really is, nothing that makes a huge difference that way? It's going to be fairly non-impacting.
So now we're back to Inga from Sweden. So the technology in Europe, is incredibly well understood. Um, and, they don't screw around over there because such a dense population and people are so close to these facilities that their emissions management is state of the art and continues to improve. I mean, every month there's another improvement. And depending what engineering report you read or which white paper you read, you can generate electricity with waste with about the same emissions as burning natural gas to create energy. And so the rule that we gave to our engineers is we want to see the best technology out there. Yeah, it's very expensive, but it is the right thing to do. And so we looked at that as being a must-have because if we can't do this right, we don't want to do it at all. And then you look at, so compare your emissions from an energy and waste facility to the emissions from a landfill. So now you have a landfill. Whenever I drive down the Lethbridge, I drive down over the big hill and I look to my left and you can see parts of it sticking out there. And landfills, when you put stuff in landfills, it continues to sit there and cook. It's kind of like a low pressure cooker, if you will, because everything gets mixed together. And they off gas. So they off gas methane. And depending on what day of the week it is and which science it is that's talking about it, it's 20 to 30 times worse than CO2. But certainly that's what they do. And you have to manage that. So you've got to collect that. And the way they normally do is they collect that and they just burn it. They don't use it to light light bulbs. In some places, they light a couple of light bulbs with it. But they convert it to CO2 away from methane because that's better for the environment. And also there's the leachate liabilities that you have with landfills. And we've got some municipalities up north that have had some interesting engagements with Alberta Environment. And we know that we have some landfills that have excavation orders because the landfill liners are leaking into the groundwater. So it's not just what we're putting into the air, Paul. It's also what are we putting into the water?
Yeah, so when you look at the big picture, you're kind of like say leaking down, which isn't good, right? As with our groundwater and so forth, and then the methane that's being given off here, and you compare that to the emissions coming from a stack that's producing electricity and steam here. It's a much better turnout here when you look at that compared to the landfills, right?
I think so, yes. And in terms of emissions, people always say to me, this is one of the reasons I was asked to get involved with the Saywell project in the first place. I understand stack emissions from what we call regulated emitters. So anything that's got a smokestack is a regulated emitter. And so they have to go through approval processes and things. And then they have mandatory reporting.
Hey, let me shift gears for a second here. I had mentioned at the top there a little bit about the recycling, and maybe we don't know what that process actually looks like. But where does recycling end up once you see the truck picks it up? Bye, it's gone, right? We have no idea where it goes after that, most of us, I think. So, I hear some stories that, some of it gets dumped in a landfill and doesn't actually get recycled. And especially now that, of course, China is not taking our garbage like they used to. That's probably true, isn't it?
Well, I get to speak to a lot of municipal councils, as you can imagine. I mean, we've got something like 50 hamlets, towns, and villages and rural municipalities involved in this, and they all got their own councils. So I think some days I should get a top hat and a cane because of the roadshow that you have to constantly educate new councils and new politicians. And I asked them directly, I said, so where does your garbage go? And you got to see the look on their face because they go, well, we put it in the bin. I said, okay. And then where does it go from there? Well, they pick it up. I said, okay. And from there, where does it go? Well, it's politicians for the most part don't care about garbage until it's piling up and stinking in front of their neighbor's house. And so most people don't know where it goes. It just goes, it goes away. So, and you're recycling and where does your recycling go? Well, I put it in the blue bin. All right. And where does it go from there? Well, they pick it up and, and then the municipality takes it. And so then you go to the municipality and say, all right, so what are you guys doing with this? They said, well, we have a qualified contractor that takes it and they've got a market for it. And so now try to make the circle smaller and good luck with that one. And for that to be occurring, you've got to believe, and you need to be a true believer in this one, you got to believe that when China shut the door with the golden sword last year, 80% of the world's recyclables were going to China. and they stopped. They slammed the door shut. So now you've got to believe that someone managed to take up 80% of the world's capacity of recyclables within 1 year.
That's
Now,
not happening.
Who is that genius?
Hey, can you give us a brief, like how long will this take to get going? Are you guys close to have this up and running at all? I mean, I know there's approval and you've got to find a proper location and it's a whole process, right?
It is, Paul. And every morning when I'm shaving and looking in the mirror, I look at myself and I say, why does this take so long? And it is a long process, concept to completion, the one in the Durham, York region. It was 10 years from concept to completion. We're a little bit more than halfway through. We had a change in government a little while ago, so that certainly affected our timeline. But right now, we're in the middle of shortlisting. So we had 6 municipalities that say, hey, listen, we want to have this thing because it's an economic engine. I mean, you're in Lethbridge. Look around at your industrial parks and look what that does in your economy. And they're saying, we want these. These are economic drivers. So we're evaluating those right now. We're getting pretty close to the short list. And then once we do that, then we are ready to go out to the technology vendor marketplace and the finance marketplace and say, okay, we got a place to put it. We've got all these municipalities. We got this much waste. And now what are we doing next? And so we're poised to do that. But in order to shortlist some of these sites, we got to go dig holes in fields. Well, there's crops out in fields right now. And I don't have to tell you in Lethbridge, how would you feel about me running my track out in your cornfield and digging a hole? So we're waiting until harvest is, until the crops are off. And then we're going to do that. And we hope to go to our membership in October with a recommendation to see what they say. Because while I might be the project lead and I'm the one that you talk to, all of the decisions are made by our members because this is a big play. It's a big deal.
Thanks for sharing all of that with us here today. We needed to hear that. Paul, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul, for having me on.
On behalf of all of us at Bridge City News, thank you so much for watching.